starting quarterback Max Johnson entered his name into the transfer portal. 2 minutes or so after that, Max's brother Jake Johnson, the number 1 tight end in the country, decommits from LSU. Deion Smith, freshman wide receiver at LSU, enters his name into the transfer portal. And right around 7 o'clock, so in about an hour's time, 4-star wide receiver Dakotas Crawford pulled his commitment from LSU. And, man, some felt like the sky was falling a little bit. And I'm here to say that I don't think that. I don't think the sky's falling at all. In fact, I think LSU's kind of just continuing to trend upwards. But when you look at Max Johnson specifically, that is a loss.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I know towards the end of the season here, there was a lot of criticism of Max Johnson. Think about what the last moment of the season was for him, though. It was the touchdown pass to beat Texas A&M where he just got destroyed, but stood in the pocket and made the throw. That's a guy who's played 18 games, really 1 full season as your starter, made 14 straight starts. In those 18 games, threw for almost 4,000 yards, 3,884, 35 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. That's very good, and a lot of that's with shoddy coaching offensively this season. So I think that does need to be factored in. You want an example? Look at a guy like Damone Clark. We've heaped nothing but praise on Damone Clark. Damone Clark, when he was being coached by Bo Pelini, lost his starting job. You get Blake Baker in there, and he's the best linebacker in college football and should have won the Butkus. We don't know if that would have happened for Max Johnson under new staff. It's tough to say. It's all speculation. What you can say for sure, though, is this is a decision that was not just made hastily. This was a decision that was talked about with his family, with the LSU coaches as well. And it was thought of as the best decision for Max Johnson, maybe the best decision for Deion Smith. Landon Jackson entered the transfer portal earlier from LSU. This is what happens in a transition between coaches. It's to be expected.
Yeah, so best of luck to Deion Smith, but they're going to be okay. They have a bunch of guys at that position that are really, really good, arguably better than him. As far as Max goes, I guess this isn't too unexpected. Honestly, Musso, I thought this is a conversation we would maybe be having after the spring. Max Johnson deciding to transfer if he did not win the starting quarterback job for next season. But it's a little surprising. Like I said, the timing. This is something I did not see coming, but it seems to me, at least to me, that when Brian Kelly first got here, the perception was going to be that Max Johnson was going to stay and he was going to compete for the job. So I don't know if something in between now and then changed. Like you said, this is probably a decision that wasn't made hastily, but it is very significant. And losing him is bad just because of the position that he plays. From a numbers standpoint, from an experience standpoint, he's a guy that's suffered some heartbreaking losses and has come through in some big wins in the SEC. That's very valuable. And like you said, Max all season, man, I graded him on a curve, at least in the beginning. Towards the end, I got a little critical. It got to the point where I was straight up upset with him after the Alabama game because I thought he left a lot of plays out there. But guys always seem to respond to him. You can make the argument that he was never really put in a position to succeed, at least not with this team in particular. Terrible offensive line. You had an inconsistent rotation of wide receivers, and you were leading an offense that never really had an identity, especially after Kayshon Boutte went down. And he had a full season as a starter to kind of show what he's got. And to me, I feel like he should have found a little bit more of a way to overcome all of that, Musso. Like I said, he never really showed me anything to believe he was going to be the guy going forward. That's not to say he can't succeed somewhere else, but just because he wasn't the biggest problem on the team doesn't necessarily mean that he was good. And yes, the stats look good, but it's not all about the stats. If we were going off of that, Miles Brennan was going to break a bunch of Joe Burrow's records, right? If you extrapolated his numbers from the season before. So Max wasn't all bad, but ultimately I didn't think he was going to be the guy anyway. This is significant because of the position that he plays, but I think this was going to happen eventually anyway, if you want my honest opinion.
So where does it leave LSU? That's really the question, obviously in the immediacy and going forward into the future, which I think is what most people are concerned about is the future. But immediacy, you have a bowl game to prepare for. You have one scholarship quarterback. That's Garrett Nussmeier, who was thought to be taking a red shirt. So obviously option number one is burn the red shirt there, but that's going to be a conversation and a decision that has to be made involving Garrett Nussmeier's family. And if it's by necessity to do that, sure. But is the Texas Bowl deemed necessary in order to throw away an entire year of eligibility, which one reason we lauded him for taking the red shirt is, man, it leaves you all your options open in the future. But that is one of your options. The other option is trot the walk-on out there. You got a couple of them. Matt O'Dowd is the one who stepped in to the backup role. That's kind of where you stand bowl game-wise for LSU. I think there's a lot that's going to be talked about when it comes to the bowl game going forward, just with potential opt-outs and things like that, because that happens every time a bowl game comes around these days in college football. Look at Kayvon Thibodeau at Oregon. He just opted out. So, I mean, that's roster management for bowl game down the road. You'll have more to talk about there, but quarterback now. I think what's obviously more pertinent is the future at LSU. And clearly, you'll have Walker Howard come in, number one quarterback in the country, but obviously transfer portal is going to be where LSU looks here. And kind of to your point, it might have been where they were looking all along at quarterback.
Exactly. That's something you had to do anyway. Like I said, it is significant just because of the position that he plays. But as far as Garrett Nussmeier goes, the big question is, kind of like you alluded to, is getting a leg up on the quarterback competition for next year worth burning his red shirt? And is there even a leg up to gain in this game? Because obviously you're playing for, a lame duck staff, and you don't know what you're showing on the field is necessarily what they want for next year's team. So I don't think him losing a big deal, honestly, is that huge of a thing in today's college football. I mean, how many guys are playing 4 years anyway? Is the goal not to just play 2 or 3 years? I mean, if he doesn't win the starting job, he's likely to go elsewhere anyway. I mean, very rarely do you see cases like we saw with Matt Flynn back in the day, where a guy waits his turn 3 years on the bench and then finally goes in. It's even more rare to see cases like we saw with Matt Castle. Guys used to not even play throughout their whole college careers and still find a way into the NFL. So I think that's the big question there. If you ask me, I don't think that's that big of a deal. But like you said, ultimately that's up to him. That's up to his family. And we have no idea how Brian Kelly feels about all this. I'm sure Garrett Nussmeier has a little bit of an idea, and that'll influence his decision in wanting to play in this game or not.
But I will just say this, as far as the long-term future of LSU, the picture only got clearer. The sky is not falling at all. The picture got clear, and that's ultimately the goal. That's why these things happen. It was always going to take LSU a little bit longer to get back to championship-level status. We talked a lot about when Brian Kelly was hired, they can win early. And they can win early. Get back to championship level. There's some holes you have to supplement on this roster, and that was going to take a couple of years anyway. It normally does. You can go back through the last 3 other coaching changes at LSU. A little bumpy for Nick Saban. He didn't inherit the best situation ever after Jared Denardo. A little bit bumpy year 1. Year 2, with his plan, though, he manages the SEC title game, sneaks his way into that, wins it. And in year 4, well, now he's got the thing humming and wins the championship. Les Miles inherited a pretty darn good situation from Nick Saban, but he didn't sign the number 1 class his first year. There were some decommitments. He signed the number 1 class in his 3rd year. Once the plan was in, they had a national championship in the boat. You're able to build it back up. Even Coach O. Coach O arguably inherited the best situation of anybody. And there was a few holes on the roster talent-wise, but he got to retain an entire coaching staff.
Mm-hmm. There are certain...
And it still took him 3 years to get to that point. This is normal. This is part of it. The picture only got clearer. Sky definitely not falling, though.
Yeah, there are certain things that Coach O had to adjust coming in. And like you said, it wasn't pretty at first, but all of his priority was getting LSU out of the Stone Age offensively. And I think we could all agree that him and Steve Ensminger early on, they definitely did that. Now, the key for Brian Kelly coming in, I think, is going to be getting LSU back to being an effective running team, being able to rush the ball like they used to back in the day, and combining that with the spread principles that have made LSU so much better in the last couple of years. I mean, prior to the last 2 seasons where they went 11-11. So the expectation is still going to be really high for Brian Kelly. I think like T-Bob kind of alluded to this morning, I think LSU fans are kind of getting used to, having better quarterbacks around. And it's a weird situation because the quarterbacks the last 2 seasons haven't necessarily been the problem on these football teams, but you are choosing to make a change. And sometimes, Musso, to get to where you want to be, not just for a specific team, but as a program, you had to take these risks. These are today's college football, and I think this is a risk that LSU has to take because, like I said, I ultimately did not think that Max Johnson was going to be the guy, and there's lots to praise. Like I said, a really tough spot the first 2 years. Like you said, I thought he showed some serious toughness against Texas A&M, and that was a valuable memory for LSU fans. But at the end of the day, he left a lot of plays on the field. I thought his pocket presence was awful at times. times, even when his protection was good. And the number one critique I had with Max Johnson is he didn't really seem to use his mobility well. And he has the potential to do that. I don't mean on designed runs. I mean kind of just improvising on certain plays and either throwing on the run or finding some of these running lanes. And I think that's definitely something that he's going to have to work on in his next stop. I think he could be an effective college football quarterback, but ultimately I don't think he was the answer at LSU.
7 LSU football players in the transfer portal, the biggest name of which being quarterback Max Johnson. Picture gets clearer by the day for the future under Brian Kelly. Continue to keep you updated on that. Staff changes, recruiting, National Signing Day, early National Signing Day, 1 week from today.